In this video, I'm going to cover the basic functionality for something like a drawing game. And I'm going to do that using an external class and the color picker that is preloaded into Adobe Flash. So I'm going to start by making a class. So I am going to do ActionScript 3.0 class. And this class is essentially going to define my brush for me. So I'm just going to call it brush 1. I'm calling it brush 1 because I might want to use more brushes later. Okay. Whenever you start out with a class, it always starts with this oops, didn't mean to click that. It always starts with this preset. Okay. So it's going to start with package, and then it's going to say public class, and then the name of the class when you started it, and then the name of the class again here next to public function. So I'm going to go ahead and save it so I don't forget. So I'm just going to do Control S, and I'm going to save it as brush 1 in a folder called drawing game. Okay. So I'm also going to go ahead and make a new ActionScript 3.0 file. Okay. And I'm going to save that as, I'll just call it drawing game. And I have to make sure I save it in the same folder that I saved the other one in. Okay. So the reason for that, the reason I want to make sure these are in the same folder is because I don't want to put anything after this word package just yet. I will show you how to do that later, but right now I just want it to say package. Essentially, if there's nothing after the word package, that means that these two files, the ActionScript class and the file that references it, are in the same folder. Okay. If you want it to be in some subfolder, then you have to put something right here. And I'll show you how to do that at the end of the video. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this line here because I want this brush to act as a movie clip. So I'm going to say public class brush 1 extends movie clip. So essentially the movie clip is a class that already exists within Flash, and I'm defining a new one, a new class that has all the same properties as the movie clip, but some extra stuff that I'm going to define down here in what is known as my constructor function. So before I can extend the movie clip, I also need to import movie clip. So import Flash display movie clip. So what I've done here is I've imported all the functionality of a movie clip, and I said this new class I'm going to make has all the functionality of a movie clip. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is define how this class is actually different than the movie clip. What are the things that are special about it? Now I want this to represent just a brush, so it's going to be essentially a circle that gets kind of dragged around the screen. And the way it will work is I'll use ActionScript code to excuse me, to make the circle leave itself all over the screen. So I want to go ahead and stick some stuff in these parentheses. The stuff inside these parentheses are essentially going to define the default values. So I'm going to define a default value of W, number equal 20. So I'm defining the variable W. I'm just making this variable here. Okay. Then H, number equals 20. So these values, W and H, these are just variables that I am defining and making up myself. You can use the word width or height. You can use whatever you want here. And then color, number equals X. Okay. So what I've done is I've defined the default values of a width of 20, a height of 20, and a color of black. This is the hexadecimal for black. So these values here that I've defaulted, okay, I will use them, these variables, within this constructor function. Okay. Now, whenever you use a class, whatever the name of the class is, you need at least one function with the exact same name as the class. This is known as the constructor function. You can have a bunch of other functions, down here or whatever if you want, but you need at least one that has the same name as the class. So what I'm going to do is use this function to essentially draw an ellipse, and I want the ellipse to be a circle for the most part in this example. I can change the values later if I want, but right now I just want it to be an ellipse with just this same height and width, so that makes it a circle in this case. So graphics, begin fill. Okay, so whenever you want to use ActionScript to draw some kind of graphic, you start with graphics, begin fill, and you end with graphics, end fill. Okay, and in the begin fill you tell it what color it's going to start with, and remember I defined color up here to be black. Okay, and I don't need to use a color inside the end fill, and I will do another video that explains hexadecimal instead of doing it in this one. Okay, so now what I want to do is tell it what graphic to actually draw. So I do graphics, draw ellipse. Remember I said I wanted to use an ellipse. That way I could make either circles or ellipses, or ellipses, I don't know, whatever. 0WH. So this first value represents the X position, this represents the Y position, this represents its width and height that I defined up here. Okay, so I'm just using the value for W because I just defined it as default of 20, and the value for H because I defined it as default of 20. Okay, so this right now, all it does is default a black circle of 20, 20 width and height at position 0, 0. Okay, so let me go ahead and save that. So now what I want to do is go into my Flash file, my FLA file, and I'm going to call this class. So the way I do it is I essentially just define a variable, okay, and I do that by doing it the same way that you essentially would define any variable. You say var, then give it a name. So since we're using ellipses, let's just use ellipse. And then you need to say what type of variable it is. Well, this one is not just going to be any old movie clip or any number. It's going to be something that fits this very specific type of movie clip here, this brush 1. So I'm going to say that it's a brush 1. Equals new brush 1. Okay, so essentially all I'm doing here is I'm saying that, okay, it's a variable, I've named it ellipse, and it's a new brush 1. So it's going to follow this class definition here. Well, right now if I run it, I get an error. Where is this? Brush 1, AS line 2. Oh, I put a dot here. Wasn't supposed to put a dot there. Okay. So this import should not have a dot here. Sorry about that. So let's come back here. Okay, right now I have absolutely nothing on my screen. Remember we said that this brush would initialize a circle right up here, but I haven't done that. The reason it hasn't done that is because I haven't actually added this to my screen. Okay, essentially whenever you take something in your library and you drag and drop it, you create an instance of it. This right here is something that is kind of like an object that's sitting in my library, and I need to tell the code to drag and drop it onto the screen. The way I do that is I say addchild ellipse. Okay, that is going to create an instance of this type of object on my screen. So now I have a circle that's black and in the top corner. Well, just having a circle in the top of the screen isn't very interesting. I want it to actually move along with my mouse. So I am going to use a mouse move function. So I'm going to do stage, add event listener, mouse event, mouse move, and I'm going to call this draw stuff. Okay. So I'm going to create a function, draw stuff, event, mouse event, void. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to move it into this function. So by doing that, I am saying, okay, well, you're only going to add this ellipse when my mouse is moving. Now there's still a problem with this. Okay, so there's no circle. As soon as my mouse moves in, it comes in. And in fact, every time I move my mouse around, it's actually drawing a new circle right on top of that. That's also not very interesting. So what I want it to do is actually draw a circle everywhere my mouse actually is, instead of just at that 0, 0 point, which I defined as the default position right here. So what I'm going to do is make it draw a circle everywhere my mouse is by doing ellipse dot x equals mouse x and ellipse dot y equals mouse y. So just as if I had an instance already sitting here on my stage, I can reference its x value and tell it to match my mouse's x value. So I create the instance and then I make it match its position with my mouse. Woohoo! So now I have a draw thing. Well, this is also not terribly interesting because it's just drawing and I can't make it stop. Okay? So what I want to actually do is make it stop, well, only color when I press my mouse button down, and stop when I release my mouse button. So I am going to use a mouse down and a mouse up function for that. So stage, add event listener, mouse events. Oopsie, that was even worse. Mouse down, start the draw. Okay, I'm also going to do stage, add event. I'm actually going to just copy and paste this because it's going to be essentially the same thing, but it's going to say up and it's going to say stop. Okay, so I am going to use two functions, one that's called only when my mouse is down and it'll start drawing, and one that's called when my mouse is released and it will stop the drawing. So function start draw, okay, and let's copy and paste this. Okay, so what I want to do is have these checked first. So I'm actually going to move this down. Okay, so I want those two functions with the mouse down and mouse up to be first. And this event listener, I don't want it to even be acknowledged. I don't even want it to start checking for this unless my mouse is down. So I'm going to move this add event listener into my mouse down function, or in my my start draw function. And I want it to stop looking at this function, or stop watching my mouse move when I release my button. Okay, so I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to change it to remove event listener. So what's going to happen is when my mouse button is pressed down, it's going to watch for where my mouse moves. And when my mouse is released, it's going to stop watching when my mouse is moved. Okay? So when my mouse is pressed down, it's going to watch for my mouse being moved, and if it is moving, it's going to run this function. If it stops, this function. So now, if we run it, you can see there's no line, and I have a duplicate function somewhere. Oh, I was supposed to call this stop draw. Sorry. Okay. So, you see we run it. It's not following me, but if I press down my mouse button, I can start drawing. When I release, I am no longer drawing. Okay. So that's not terribly interesting because I'm just drawing, black circles, or whatever. I can start and stop, but I want to be able to change the color. So what I'm going to do is up at the very top, I'm going to define the variable color to just be some number. I'm not going to initialize it at anything. I don't really need to initialize it because this brush class already has a default value of black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these values in this brush to remember when we had our brush class, we said the first number would be the width, the second number would be the height, and the last number would be the color. So I am going to just use, 10, and then the word color. Okay, so I have actually changed it because remember this was initially 20. So you can see when I run it now, it's actually smaller. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have this color be affected by the color picker. So if you look in Window and then go to Components, you'll see here color picker. I'm just going to drag and drop it onto my stage down here because I like it down there. And you'll see it's in my library now. So I want to give this an instance name, ACP. So now that I've given it an instance name, I can reference it in my code. Okay, so go back to my frame here. So what I want is whatever color I pick here, I want it to be this variable. I want to take this color and set it equal to this variable. So I am going to create another function, and I can just do it up at top. So I'm going to watch that color picker, and I'm going to add event listener, color picker event dot color picker event dot change color changed. Okay, so I am going to watch this to see if the color changes. Okay, so function color changed is an event, color picker event void. Okay. Now before I can use this color picker, I actually need to import the color picker events. Okay, so I just need to put that up here. So import fl, let's just do controls, let's do them all. Color picker, okay, and then import fl events dot color picker event. Okay, the only one I really needed was that one. Oops. Okay, anyway, so I just have them both in there just to be safe. So I have everything I need for the color picker if I want to start doing different things with it. Okay, so now I want to say, okay, so whatever the color is, so when this color changes and it starts at black, when this color changes to something different, I want it to set this variable color equal to the same thing as that color. Now, by importing these things here, I am allowing myself to use color picker events, and I'm also allowing myself to use special properties of this. So I could do color equals ACP, because that's this instance, dot selected color. This is a property that's imported up here. So now let's see if it works. Okay, so I can draw black, select a color, and now I can draw blue. So this is almost where I want it to be. Okay, there's a few problems. The one that is most apparent is I can draw over that color picker, and it's kind of hard to select now, if I can even select it at all. So I'm going to fix that. So the way I'm going to fix the ability to draw over my color picker and not be able to select it really anymore is I'm actually going to delete it off the stage, and I'm going to, instead of specifically adding the instance by dragging and dropping it on the stage, I'm going to create it the same way I created the instance of the ellipse. Okay, so up here I'm going to do var ACP, so I'm going to use the same instance name, so that way I don't have to change the code right here. It's a color picker. And it's a new one. Okay, I'm going to add it to the stage. Okay, so I created one and I just added it to the stage. You can see, there it is. Woo, and it still works. I can still color over it though. I also don't really like where it is. So I'm going to use the move property. So I'm going to take my instance, ACP, and I'm just going to move it to 0, 300 or something. So I don't like where that is. Let's make it like 10, 350. Well, let's make it 50, 350. That looks good. I like where that is. Okay. So I can still color over it though. So I want to show you, I keep clicking out. Okay. I want to show you what happens. So notice I color my black. I pick a color. I color brown. Pick this color here. Pick it. I color it. Notice every time I start coloring, it goes above the previous one. In fact, every one of these little circles here is drawn above the previous one. If it's easier to think about it, you could just think of the entire line as being an instance instead of each of the individual circles being instances. So each time addchild is being used, it adds it above all the other stuff that got added. Okay, so this stuff is being added above that color box. Okay, but if I want it to always be above anything I draw, what I can essentially do is add it above this. So whenever I stop drawing, I can add it above it. So I can just use the addChild function again, but I can do it in this stop draw function. So as soon as I release my mouse, it'll re-add that color picker so that it is above what I drew. So I can draw on it, bam, but it pops right back on top. Pops right back on top. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I also want to go ahead and make this a little more universal so I can add more variables later. So I'm going to do var w and just make it a number, and var h and just make it a number. Okay. And I'm going to change this to W and H. And now it's going to be, oopsie, what happened? For H. Oh, let's go ahead and just make it 10 or whatever. 10 equals 10. Oh, equals. Okay, so now it's the same size. So the reason I did this is I can later and in another video I'm going to show you how to change these sizes using a list. Okay, so a drop down list that will allow me to change the various sizes for it. So before I go to that, I want to show you how, if your class is saved in another folder, how to access it. So remember, I had it saved in the same folder as my FLA file. So I'm going to close this so that I can move it. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'll just call it scripts. Make sure I capitalize it now. And then inside of there, I'm going to create a new folder and call it brushes. Okay, so I am going to take this and drag it and drop it into that brushes folder. So now if I try to run my Flash, it's going to crash on me, but that's not what I'm wanting it to do. Let's just give it a second. I'm going to pause it and I'll be right back and see if it's running again. Okay, I'm back. So I have the drawing game in a separate in a different folder than the scripts, than the brush class. So now if I try to run this, it's going to say, hey, what the heck, I don't know where that brush is. So what I'm going to have to do is open this brush class. And remember at the beginning I said that anything after package is going to tell you where it is in reference to the FLA file. So my FLA file is here in the top level, and this package is in the scripts folder and then the brushes folder. So I'm going to say scripts brushes and save it. I'm scared my thing's going to crash again. Okay, so, and is it? Let's give it a second. Okay. Anyways, so when it gets back up and running, what I've done is I've changed it to tell the class where it is, but now I need to tell the FLA file where it is, and I will show you in just a second. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not having good luck today. Anyways, okay, so we told the brush file, brush 1 file, where it was by changing the value right after packages, but now I need to tell this FLA file where it is. So up here, where I have my import stuff, I need to do import scripts brushes dot brush 1, because that's where I saved my class. So I saved it in the scripts folder, and then in the brushes folder, and it was brush 1. So now if I run it, it works. I don't get that anything like, hey, where's your brush? Now, if you have more than one brush in that folder, that's why I made a brushes folder. So if I made more, I would just put an asterisk here, and that says import everything that's in there. And so this still works. So I recommend if you're going to have more than one brush, which you probably will, you put an asterisk here. Okay, that's it. Like I said, I will show how to change these values with a list in a later video. But yeah, that's all you really need to know to just do a very simple drawing application, or you can draw over the color picker, change your color. You know, there are other things obviously you might want to do, like be able to erase and to be able to clear it all out, but I just wanted to show how to do a simple drawing game and how to use classes.